Hello and welcome to La Rosa Reads. I'm Denise La Rosa, and today I will be sharing with you my January wrap-up. Let's talk books. All right, we are back together again, or for some of you, you may be here for the very first time. I am amused by the process of recording videos on TBRs and wrap-ups. This month, the month of January, was my first experience with doing this myself. I admire and love watching videos that are on BookTube around TBRs and wrap-ups for each month. And I have to tell you guys, this whole TBR wrap-up thing is really, really tricky. So if you got a chance to watch my January TBR video, that's great. If not, we'll be sure to put it up in the cards for you. You will notice today that not very many of my books that were on my January TBR made it to my monthly wrap-up. That means I didn't actually read a whole lot of them, and there are some reasons for that. So number one of the books that I had planned on reading, The Last Thing He Told Me, I actually got a chance to read it in advance of the month of January. I was able to get that book in towards the end of December, so that's that. There are some other books that just didn't make the cut. I just had to go with my mood, and as the mood hit me and the books that matched that vibe, those are the books I went with. So I'm not going to be rigid with this and just commit to these books that are in my TBRs just because I did the video. I think that would not be an authentic way to read and be in community with all of you. So, you're just going to be a part of my messy journey, which is no different than any other part of my life. I think it's just messy and organic and, all those things. And that's what I love about life. We just do what we do. So let's do this. Before I start sharing my monthly wrap-up reads with all of you, I want to back up and say that I felt like the month of January actually exceeded my reading expectations for that month, and I got off to a rocky start. So my goal was to read 4 books this month, and I actually ended up reading 7. It didn't look like I was going to get even the 4 books in that I had planned at the beginning of the month because, unfortunately, I had a wicked case of vertigo and ended up in the hospital. And anyone who's had that before knows that vertigo and reading just do not mesh. Let's just say that. So I was a little concerned. I missed reading during that time, and I felt like I was going to be behind on my reading. And I became pleasantly surprised that I whizzed through some books because they were that good. The first book that I finished in the month of January is Liberty. So this book did make the cut. So this was the book that I believe it was one of the first books that I shared in my January TBR video. And I actually read the book and got through the book this month. With Liberty, we have a young Black woman. This is set in like the late 1860s. I believe it's post-enslavement, post-Civil War. And her mother is very light-skinned and could pass as white. Liberty, however, took after her late father and has a darker skin tone. And that creates a lot of tension. The relationship between Liberty and her mother is a little fraught due to that whole idea around colorism and that whole experience. It's also interesting because Liberty's mother, who is Black, actually is a doctor. And to think of a Black professional woman at that time is really an interesting character trait for this historical fiction work. So Liberty is going through this coming of age. Her mother has these dreams for her to be a doctor, to follow in her footsteps, but Liberty is not really feeling like that's her calling. She ends up falling in love with music. There's 2 friends in college because her mom whisked her away to college, pushing her to study medicine. While she's there, she makes friends with these 2 young women who are singers, and she falls in love with music. She returns home from a break, and she did not inform her mother of something that was happening at college that would have broken her mother's heart, aka she's not doing too well with her grades. But with all of that happening, she comes back home. Her mother has this young man, Emmanuel, who is like her new protege. That's really, her mom is fully invested in training him to become a doctor. And Liberty gets a little jealous because she's like, who is this guy that's got my mom's attention and actually has a love and passion for being a doctor in a way that I didn't, and is connecting with my mom in this way. She ends up falling in love with Emmanuel, she being Liberty, and he is Haitian, and whisk her off back to Haiti. And from there, it gets wild. I was pleasantly surprised that this book took the turns that it did, because I had no idea it was going to unfold in the way that it did. I really enjoyed this as my first read for January, and I highly recommend this book. So my second read for the month of January is a small but mighty book by the title, We Should All Be Feminist. Now, this is a book that I lifted up in my Diverse Spines book haul and tag video. If you did not get a chance to view that video, we'll put it up in the cards for you. I really was looking forward to reading this book because every Swedish girl, whenever she turns 16, receives a copy of this book by the government. I found that to be a fascinating fun fact about this book. And having two daughters and being a woman myself, identifying as a woman, I really was wanting to know, what is it about this book that inspired and motivated the Swedish government to put it in the hands of every 16-year-old girl in that country? Adichie is interesting to me because I feel like her works, her literary works, are all around me, and I have yet to dive into any of them. This is my first book of hers. This book is full of excerpts, if not the full-fledged TED Talk that she delivered some years ago. I found the book to be inspiring, but not quite as inspiring as I thought it would be. Oh, I feel bad even saying that, but I'm going to embrace my own opinion. I have a right to my own opinion, and if your opinion differs, that's great. That's fine. It felt a little bit like, yeah, we know these things already about how women aren't respected, how boys are brought up to not have emotions, girls are brought up to really emphasize and focus on what others think of them. There wasn't anything new here. Also, she's Nigerian, and she was talking a lot about what was happening specifically in Nigeria in regards to sexism and women in that country. I enjoyed that because I love learning about what's happening in the world, in other countries. I just think that enriches our own lived experiences and makes us more worldly and empathetic to others. So, but at the same time, it was so specific to issues happening in Nigeria that some of it was a little lost for me. It was informative, but it was kind of hard for me to connect to all of it. With that being said, I was able to share excerpts with my oldest daughter while I was reading it, and she enjoyed it. She really had a lot of profound things to say for her little 9-year-old self. And so in that way, it was a bonding moment. It was a book that really brought us together and helped us to have some conversation starters. So there's a particular quote or excerpt that I wanted to share with you guys that was one of the more profound excerpts, moments in the book. Gender is not an easy conversation to have. It makes people uncomfortable, sometimes even irritable. Both men and women are resistant to talk about gender or are quick to dismiss the problems of gender because thinking of changing the status quo is always uncomfortable. So I really love that she brought that to light, that she lifted up the fact that, this is uncomfortable. And oftentimes talking about a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion issues and topics can be uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that we should avoid them. So it was nice. It was a nice, solid read. Interestingly enough, I read 3 audiobooks, or I should say I listened to 3 audiobooks this month, which is not the norm for me. If I could get 1 audiobook in a month, that's actually pretty shocking and pretty good for me. I will say that the reason why I think I got through more audiobooks this month is because I had one that I was already listening to for like 3 months and finally finished in January. And the other two were they were shorter and they were really inspiring. I just couldn't stop listening to it. So I was motivated to just keep it on while I was doing laundry and all the things. So that kind of pushed and moved me along with the audiobooks. So the first audiobook I finished is The Way of Integrity: Finding the Path to Your True Self by Martha Beck. I got the Oprah bug with this one. Oprah said this is a book we should read, so I decided to get the audiobook. All of my self-help type of books that I decide to dive into, I have been choosing to listen to those via audiobook as opposed to reading the hard copy. I really prefer fiction and biographies and memoirs for my hard copy books. And I have to say, this book took me a long time to read. However, it was really worthwhile. What Martha Beck does is she uses Dante's Inferno to help people navigate how to live in integrity, how to be their truest selves, and despite what other people, whether it's loved ones or complete strangers, think and feel. And she uses her own lived experiences also to help us understand that. And she is an expert. I'm not quite sure exactly what her profession is, like psychiatry or psychology, but she's in that profession. She's in that realm of, psychology that really gives her some credibility. So she knows what she's talking about. I didn't have a ton of takeaways. I feel like it was a little forgettable. I just enjoyed, I think, more than anything, hearing her own lived experiences and her own stories and how she connected them with her her outline, if you will, her outline and her strategies for us to live in integrity. That probably was what grabbed my attention more than anything. But it was all right. Oprah loves it. That doesn't mean I have to love it. It was all right for me. Great for Oprah. Maybe you'll enjoy it, read it, listen to it, and let me know what you think. All right. So I went from self-help to a memoir, and this memoir is titled This Boy We Made, a memoir of motherhood, genetics, and facing the unknown by Taylor Harris. I will be doing a book review of this book, so I don't want to spill all the tea in my wrap-up video. However, I would be remiss not to give you a little bit of the synopsis and tell you what my initial thoughts are of this book. So Taylor Harris takes us on this journey of motherhood, of parenting. She has 3 children. She has 2 daughters. One is the oldest. The other is the youngest. And then in the middle is Christopher. And they nicknamed him Tophs. Toph's birth and also the pregnancy, delivery, labor, everything seemed pretty much normal. There were a few things here and there. And for those of us who are mothers, we can totally relate. Things like maybe his birth weight was a little low. His head circumference may have been a little on the larger side, but all in all, things seemed pretty normal. And a medical episode happens to Tophs that totally just shocks the family, throws them into a medical emergency and a medical journey that just seems to be never ending. And so this book does a great job of viewing this through the lens of a mother while also being helpful for anyone. You don't have to be a mother to resonate with this book or to connect with this book or to enjoy this book. She talks about everything from being a mother of a Black boy who is experiencing some health challenges and what that looks like on the healthcare end, to being the mother of a Black boy who is struggling to get his needs met in school and really pushing back, challenging, advocating for her son to have the best services that he needs and deserves in the education system through IEPs and other things that will support him as he is grappling with being a child with special needs. And so I actually encourage educators, parents, anyone who is invested in the healthcare system as well, to read this book. You really gain a lot of insight that really helps you to be empathetic to the needs of patients and students. The second audiobook that I listened to this month was Walking Miracle: How Faith, Positive Thinking, and Passion for Football Brought Me Back from Paralysis and Helped Me Find My Purpose by Ryan Shazier, number 50 of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I have done a book review video of this wonderful book, and if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. We'll have that link up in the cards for you so you can watch that. Because I've done a book review, I'm not going to delve into too many details here other than to say Ryan Shazier experienced a traumatic injury in December of 2017. And it's a moment that for football lovers, for Steelers fans, was like experienced by so many people. It felt like the whole world just came to a screeching halt. And that's just for us viewing from the outside in. For Ryan Shazier, even though I've seen interviews of him, I was really, really, really looking forward to listening to his story and really understanding what this experience was like for him behind the scenes in real time with his family and friends and teammates and coaches standing by him and going through this experience with him. Ryan Shazier starts off talking about that fateful day and also helps us to understand him as a man of faith and as an athlete, and quite frankly, as a human being on this journey that we know of as life. And life happens, and the unexpected happens, and we have to learn how we're going to move forward. And he shares such wonderful strategies and actionable steps and a game plan, if you will, for how he did just that. And he overcame the impossible. How many of us were wondering, would he ever be able to walk again? And he's doing it. So definitely watch that video, that book review video, to learn more about what my thoughts are on Walking Miracle. I highly recommend that you listen to the audiobook or pick up the hard copy. Woo, woo, y'all. I had to squeeze in some romance for the month of January. My goal is to read at least one romance novel. I don't want to say at least. One romance novel every month because they're just so good. They're just delicious. They're steamy. They're totally escape from reality. So my choice for romance in the month of January was The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. So you guys, if you watched my January TBR, I believe it was The Wedding Party was the Jasmine Guillory book that I wanted to read next. I did read Royal Holiday. That was my first Jasmine Guillory book. I read that in December. It piqued my interest in reading the entire Wedding Date series, and I happened to have The Wedding Party on hand. It was like literally here in my house. I had forgotten I even picked it up. I think I just picked it up because the cover was cute. Whatevs. The point is, so many of you were telling me, pump the brakes, Denise. You've got to go back to the beginning to really appreciate the books. The entire series. And so that's what I did. Even though each book in this series is a standalone, it can stand on its own. The characters are so intertwined into the threads of each book in the series. And me just being type A, I had to start from the beginning and like keep moving along. So The Wedding Date is spicy. We have Alexa Monroe. Doesn't that just sound like a sexy name? A black woman, young black woman who's a lawyer, works for the mayor in her city, Alexa Monroe. Then down here we have this fine white man by the name of Drew Nichols. They literally get stuck in an elevator together, and it was just like a rom-com. I could totally see this happening on film. So they're stuck in this elevator together, and Drew is like, oh my gosh, I have to go to this wedding. You've got to read the book to see exactly why he was panicked, because his date canceled on him. Trust me, you would be panicked too if you knew the circumstances of this wedding. And they ended up hitting it off, Alexa and Drew. And he was like, oh, I'm doing something crazy here, but I think I want her to be my date at this wedding. And so he's like, will you pretend to be my girlfriend at this wedding? And she's like, okay. Now keep in mind, Alexa is not a woman who typically takes risk. So this was really out of her comfort zone, but boy, oh boy, mm, mm, mm. It was worth it. They hit it off. It gets really sexy and steamy and spicy. And so we have all of the love scenes and all of that goodness that comes with romance novels. And then there's some relationship stuff that's starting to happen. At first, it was just like, these strangers with benefits. I wouldn't even call them friends with benefits. And they start to really fall for each other. And you go on this journey where they're like trying to figure this out. They're like faking it, trying to act like, oh, this is no big deal, but it really is a big deal to each of them. And then they have to just totally let their feelings out and say, oh, but I love you. I really want to be with you. The ending is very predictable, but very good. This was just a good book. It was a nice break from reality and historical fiction and memoirs and all the stuff. And I enjoyed it. So I'm going to go to the next book in the series, The Proposal, and I'm just going to keep on keeping on. So if you've read this book, let me know what you think. So we have arrived at the last book that I read in January of 2022. And it's funny because my daughters are like begging for me to stop recording because they have to be quiet and they're ready to play. So this book is very timely for me to talk about. It is titled Set Boundaries, Find Peace, A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself by Nedra Glover Tawwab. I really enjoy following her on social media. That's actually how I discovered this book. She has an amazing Instagram account that's full of wisdom. And this book, you guys, I haven't been reading self-help books for a while, and I did read 2 this month, actually listened to 2. And let me just say, this book was solid. It literally delivered on what the title is. It gives you a guide to reclaiming yourself. I love the way it was laid out. So she does a deep dive into what boundaries are, what they are not, why you need boundaries. So she frames this up so beautifully in part 1. Part 2, she uses a chapter to break down how to set boundaries in various areas of your life, in relationships, such as romance, such as family. We have the workplace, social media, all of those universal spaces and relationships that, like, hello, we need some serious boundary setting for. And I found it to be an invaluable resource. This is an audiobook that I'm going to return to time and time again. For example, if I'm having a crazy work week and I feel like I'm off balance and I don't have any boundaries, or I don't know what my boundaries are, or people don't know my boundaries, I'm going to go to that specific chapter and listen to revisit and really dive into how I can set clear boundaries in the workplace. Same thing with relationships, same thing with families. This is not a resource. This book is a resource, and it's not meant for you to read once and be done. It's set up in a way that you can revisit specific chapters for whenever life just throws some curveballs at you and you feel off balance, and that you feel that you have to be setting some boundaries in order for you to reclaim yourself and your sanity. Loved it, loved it, loved it. I highly recommend it. And I think it was a sweet way to end my January reading because it's the new year, the first month in a new year, and I feel like I can use this book for the rest of the year. All right, that was my first wrap up. That was my January wrap up for 2022. I think I'm going to really like these. I hope you're willing to take this ride with me and be okay with the fact that my wrap ups may look a lot different than my TBRs. Is that the case for you? I'm really curious. Let me know what your January reading plans were, and did your plans unfold the way you were planning for them to, or did you get some surprises? I would love to know. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and ring that bell. Stick around. I also have more videos for you to watch and catch up on. You can start with this video right here. And until next time, happy reading. Peace.